Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. Today I am here to go through all the books that I read in March. This video is possibly going to be on the longer end because I didn't get the chance to do my mid-month wrap-up like I had initially planned. So because of that, I'm going to do my best to be as concise as I possibly can. I'm so sorry if I don't go into a lot of details on all of the books, because I can already tell that I'm probably not going to remember every little thing about each of the books that I wanted to mention. I don't think I have anything else that I wanted to mention as far as like introduction for this video, so let's just go ahead and move straight into my stats for March. In March, I finished a total of 25 books. Over those 25 books, I read 8,776 pages with an average rating of 3.67 stars. I didn't have any DNFs for the month. 8 of the books that I finished were rereads. 11 of them I read were print books. 4 of the books I read were ebooks, and then 10 of them were audiobooks. As always, I'm going to be going through these in rating orders. I usually start with DNFs, but since I didn't have any, I'm going to be moving straight over into rereads. Kind of had rereads throughout the month. Normally I would talk about them all first, but some of the rereads that I had were, I'm going to be talking about them like in the actual rating section because I then went on to read a book in the same series. The first set of rereads that I'm going to be talking about, and this is actually the only one that I decided to separate the new read from the rereads, because most of the rereads were all done together. And then the new read was, you'll see. Anyway, the first set of rereads that I have to talk about was from The Others, as well as The World of the Others by Anne Bishop. So I'm sure you guys have probably, if you've been on my channel for a while, you probably have heard me talking about this series. This is a series that I basically read every year now at this point, since the first time I read it, I think back in 2019. I did also mention this in my February wrap up, which I recently posted, so if this is sounding familiar, that is why, because I think I read the first 2 books from the original Other series in February. I think I mentioned this briefly in that video as well, but I remembered or realized that it was a new book coming out in The World of the Others, which was the spinoff from the original series that was set to come out in March. And I was just like, okay, well, since that's the case, I might as well just go ahead and continue my reread. So that's exactly what I did. So I'm actually going to be branching these, or sectioning this off into 2 separate sections. So I'm going to do the rest of the others and then move over into The World of the Others. So quickly going over the rest of the books from the original Other series. So this series starts off following this blood prophet who escapes captivity and makes her way to the lakeside courtyard, which is run by the others, or the paranormal creatures of this world. Just a little bit more about the world, because I don't always go into this when I do my rereads and talk about them, but the way that this world is set up, it's like an alternate universe of the world that we're living in, but it's, I feel like, almost a lot more simplified than how we are, but it still kind of makes sense for the circumstances. So it's just like there was this creator, like the others, or the paranormal creatures, had a certain part of the world, or the humans had the other side, you know, a completely separate side of the world. The others, they were like perfectly happy with their land. They were living peacefully, you know, doing whatever they did, and of course the humans expanded. They kept growing and growing with the amount of people that were living, until they eventually decided to go and try to explore more, where they came across the land that the others lived on. Eventually the humans stumble upon the land that the others are living on, and through several generations they eventually kind of coexist, but the others have a strict policy on what's allowed to be used. So only so much land is allowed to humans. They are only allowed to have access to so many materials. There are strict stipulations on what they can and can't make if it's causing harm to the land and things like that. So yeah, we have a group in Lakeside, and It's known as a lakeside courtyard. They're kind of a one of a kind type of situation because we have others who are running businesses that are open to humans. And this is kind of really the only area where the others are doing this. And Meg makes her way. Meg is a blood prophet. She makes her way there. The others take her in and is following the consequences and kind of delving into what happens because of that. Not necessarily just because of that, because there's really like other factors going on, but having access to a blood prophet, following what exactly happens and what it means with them taking her in. So that's the longest I've gone into that. I probably won't do that again for a while unless I'm talking about like the full world again, because that's something that, like I said, is explored and discussed at the beginning of every volume. And it's like once you hear it one time and you get a good understanding of the world, you really don't need it repeated. I thought that I had gotten through like multiple books in February, but looking at it, I'm pretty sure that it's only 5 books in the original series, and I have 4 listed here. So maybe I started the second book but just didn't get it finished, which obviously that's what that means if I have them all listed here. So yeah, I basically finished off the last 4 books, or the other 4 books in the series. I did also mention this in my February wrap up, but just in case you did not watch that, I decided not to give these new ratings this time around. I read Murder of Crows, which is book 2, Vision in Silver, Marked in Flesh, and then Etched in Bone, and I didn't give any of those 4 new ratings like I just mentioned. So moving on, we then go into The World of the Others, which is the spin-off series. I decided this time around that I was going to read them out of order. Basically, the first book starts off with completely new characters. They're in a different part of the world. The second one is actually taking place in the town of Bennett, which is physically in one of the main books in the original other series. This time around, however, I decided to read book 2 in that spin-off series because it fit most reading it right after the final book in the original series, Etched in Bone, because the timelines kind of combined, and that one was called Wild Country. I did decide to reread these because I had not read them since the very first time I read them when they first came out. So I figured that would fit best for me. I don't want to get into a whole lot of details because possible spoilers, but yeah, this one takes place in the town called Bennett with a mix of new and old characters and some other shenanigans going on. Of course, the overall theme for these is that humans are bad, they're up to no good, and others having to deal with the fallout of that. So yeah, that is Wild Country, and this time around I did give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think that reading it so soon and so close with Etched in Bone, it really like heightened the reading experience. And then I went over into Lake Silence, which is technically the first book that was published in this spinoff. This is centered around this character named Vicky Devine, who has been recently divorced, and in the settlement her husband kind of gives her this property called the Jumble. Is really just a few cabins in a main house in the middle of what they call the Wild Country, which is basically land that is surrounded by the others. We follow Vicky. She's working on improving these cabins so that she can really make a living off of whatever she has left from the marriage. And then she ends up finding out that a man is kind of dead on the edge of her property. He was murdered, and she's trying to figure out what's going on while these people are coming to try to take the land or property that she was given for their own purposes. I will say that I felt like I didn't necessarily appreciate this one as much when I first read it, mostly because I was just like coming straight out of the other series. I was just like, I really do not care about these new people. Like eventually as I read, I did start to care about them, but honestly I was just like, I really just want to read more of Meg and Simon and that whole group of people. I thought this woman was interesting as well. It was a lot going on, more so human versus human type of things, but then these others coming in to kind of save her when they realize that they're out to get her, and she was like doing a lot to kind of help them out, even though she didn't always realize that. Anyway, this time around that one got 4 stars for me, and I had fun rereading those. So that was actually the last of the rereads that I had in my actual reread section. So now we're going to move over into my rated books, starting off with the lowest rated for the month. And this was kind of sad because I was looking forward to this one the most, or you know, one of the ones I was the most excited about, and that was Requiem of the Rose King, Volume 1 by Aya Kano. This is like a historical fiction kind of reimagining of Shakespeare's. It said King Henry, Henry the Sixth and Richard the Third, which I did not realize going into this, that this story was kind of based on actual events that happened, I guess. So this volume was really just set up, but in the story we're going to be seemingly following the character of Richard, who is the black-haired guy on the cover. He is actually the third son of the House of York, and he believes that he has been cursed from birth, because his lovely mother keeps telling him that, and she treats him like that it's not her child. Whole nother story. So anyway, his father is the patriarch of House York, and he believes that he is the rightful king, or the next rightful king of medieval England. I think something ended up happening, and they said at a certain point the king was stepped down, but he died. His son took over, and now that family doesn't want to give up the throne, and Richard's father says, like, I'm supposed to be king. So he's like, we're gonna go attack this other kingdom. I think they might be possibly family or something like that. Not 100% sure on that, but he's like, we're gonna go attack these people so that we can take over. We can be, I can be the next rightful king, and we're gonna be in the place that we're supposed to be in. And we're pretty much just following Richard's role in that, and I guess the consequences of whatever ends up happening. I did only end up getting to the first volume. This was one of my deck of TBR pulls. I was trying to get through both volumes 1 and 2, but after reading this first one, I was actually pretty discouraged. I am still going to try to get to volume 2 just so that I can say that it's read, and I guess see if it gets any better, because this first volume was not it. It was not it. Let me get into this one. This is probably going to be one that I might get a little ranty on, so sorry if I do. I'm going to try to at least keep it contained as much as I can. I had heard this recommended based on Prince Freya. I fell in love with Prince Freya, so I was just like, okay, having something recommended based on that and saying that this had similar feels, I was just like, okay, don't really know much about it, but I'm gonna pick it up. This one was really kind of all over the place. It kind of just throws you right in as if you know the story, and going into this not realizing that this was based off of something else, which is also based off of true events. I was just so completely lost, and I find it very hard to follow the story. And then it didn't help the fact with you know, when you have mangas that are drawn by the same people, characters tend to start looking the same. So we're following two different families, but a lot of the characters look so similar. So even when it was switching back and forth, it took me a minute to understand, like, okay, hold up, we're actually on the other family, and not the one that we were just talking about, because there will be a page flip and then like we're on the other side of this war. And it was like no chapter breaks, no clear like marking like house of so and so and house of so and so. And it was very confusing. And I went onto Goodreads because I was like, is it just me? Like, am I just slow? I was really trying to figure out, and a lot of the reviews that I saw were just like, even I saw somebody give it 5 stars, and they were just like, did I give this 5 stars even when it probably doesn't deserve it? And they went and listed all of the things, and like why they ended up giving it 5 stars was for something that might be revealed like about a character content wise, but like all the aspects of why she shouldn't have given it 5 stars is exactly the problems that I was having with it. So it's just something about this first volume, and I don't know if it's cleared up. I did only purchase 2 volumes of this because I didn't want to like go all out and buy like half the series and then not end up liking it, which so far I didn't enjoy this first volume. So I am still trying to read volume 2 so that I can make a decision. I normally try to give it like 3 or 4 volumes before I fully decide, but I think if volume 2 is more the same thing, then I'm probably just going to decide not to finish up with the series. There's things that I would like to know, but honestly not enough for me to continue on if volume 2 is set up the same way that this one was. Probably already spent more than enough time talking about this one, but this first volume of Requiem of the Rose King ended up getting 2.5 stars once I put it through Cowpile. We're moving right along into my 3-star section. We're moving over into another manga, and this is one that I have actually already talked about in a Manga Spice Cafe video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one. But we have Burn the Witch by Tite Kubo, and I'm going to start off by saying that if you are curious, I did talk about this one in my October Manga Spice Cafe video. In this story, we're following Nini Spankole and Noelle Nahashi, who are wingbind agents. In this world, we have humans in the regular London, like regular human world, but then we also have humans in what is called reverse London. And basically, in this reverse London, dragons exist, and we have the wingbind agents who are doing different things with dragons. They're kind of like low tier agents, I guess, because they do all of like the little menial tasks. But at the beginning of the story, our two characters end up getting kind of sort of a bigger role because they end up having to go save a human when it turns out that there is a dark dragon around him, and then it becomes a whole ordeal because they have to protect him until the other people that are in this agency decide exactly what to do with him. I'm not gonna go through thoughts or anything in this video because I did already talk about that, and honestly I think I finished this like super early in the month, so I don't remember a whole bunch about it. I just know that it was kind of an average read for me, so if you guys are curious about thoughts, definitely go check out the video. But as far as rating, this one got 3 stars. Moving on to my next 3-star read, and that one was Dark Lover by J.R. Ward, which is the first book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood, I think is what it's called. This one is actually a dual perspective story following Wrath and Beth. Wrath is actually the last purebred vampire that exists in this world, so he is supposed to be like king of all the vampires, but because of events that has happened in his past, he feels like he's not worthy of that title, I guess. He treats himself like he's lower than the position that he's supposed to be holding, basically. And then on the other hand, Beth is actually half vampire who was fathered by Raz's like best friend, I guess is the best way to call that. And at the beginning of the story, Beth's dad actually ends up coming to Raz and like asking if he could take her in as like his feeding person, pretty much to kind of help transition her into becoming a vampire, because I think she's about to change over into a vampire, and he's like, to help ease that transition, can you please do this for me? And Wrath is like, I'm not having it, I don't want anything to do with that, no. But like right after that, Darius ends up being killed because there's like a bomb put on his car, and Wrath is like, okay, well, I have no other choice but to follow the last wish of my dead friend. So he ends up going to seek out Beth so that he can help her with her transition. In the midst of all of this that's going on, there is someone that is hunting down vampires, and they're trying to figure out that mystery. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I will say that it's kind of on par with first books in paranormal romance series, especially this one. I feel like is probably a little bit more dated. So this one was interesting, but I feel like I wasn't completely sold on it. It seemed a lot longer than it needed to be. Also, I wasn't a fan of all of the characters. I thought like it was a lot kind of going on in this first book because we had like 5 different points, and it got to a point where I was like, how is all of this going to come together? I think by the end of this I was interested enough to continue on with the series, because I feel like this is probably one of those that it gets better as you go along, especially since you have so many people that have been following this series for years. So I'm sure that because I've gotten into other series, that this one I could see myself falling in love with later on down the line. This one was kind of just average, but I think I am going to continue. When, I don't know, especially because I don't have any physical copies, so less likely to happen right away. But I am curious and I do want to read more. I read that and it got 3 stars. Alright, so we are still in my 3-star section, but now we're going to move over into some comics that I read because of another deck of TBR prompts. Unnatural volumes 1 through 3 by Mirka and Dolfo. So in this story, we're following this character named Leslie Blair, who is a pig girl, and she is very quickly approaching her 25th birthday. On your 25th birthday, you're added to this like mating program, because in this world it's just like species are meant to stay together. Like they can't go out and have a lover of another species. Like it was literally against the law. And they would either go to jail, or if it was like a second offense, they would go to this like retraining program. Our main character Leslie is a little concerned because she's been dreaming like sexual thoughts or sexual dreams about being with this wolf, and she knows that it's against the law, and she's just like, well, I can't be doing that. On the night of her birthday, she gets this email that she has actually been chosen to join this program. They have set her up on this date, and she has to go, I think, the next day. She goes on this date, and then things get a little weird when she tries to leave. She's just like, okay, I've had enough for tonight, I'm leaving. And they're like, where are you going? You can't leave yet. And it turns into this whole ordeal, and we find out that there was more going on, which I don't really want to get into because they're actually really short. So just know that although it's like kind of important, it's not like the main focus of the story. But honestly, with these, I felt like they were a little too short, because there was definitely a chance to explore a lot of different things in this, and I felt like they were trying to go through this so quickly. The author / artist, I don't know if she did the artwork as well, but it seemed like she was just trying to get to the point so quickly that we didn't have chance to explore the nuances of the world and things like that. And I felt like that kind of hurt the story. It was pretty exciting in the beginning and the last volume. I felt like first 2 volumes were the best, which you'll see when I quickly go over ratings. And then the last volume, it was kind of a letdown after reading the first 2, even though I wasn't like in love with the first 2 either. Like I mentioned, there is only 3 volumes in this series, so I did read all 3 just so I can knock out this story. But volume 1, which was called Awakening, got 3.5 stars. Volume 2 was called The Hunt. That one got 3.5 stars. And then finally volume 3 was called Rebirth, and that one only got 3 stars. The next set that I have to talk about is the first 2 volumes of the case study of Vanitas. Very short description of this, because this is like basically a tagline that I got from, I think, Goodreads. This is a tale of vampires and curses set in a steampunk Paris. Very simplified. I figured that was the easiest way to just give you a description instead of trying to fumble through that. So in this story, we are following 2 characters, No, who is actually the guy on this cover, and Vanitas, who is the guy on this cover. So at the start of the story, No is making his way, I don't remember exactly from where, but he's making his way to Paris because his teacher has set him out to find and research the Book of Vanitas. I thought these were interesting, but not exactly what I expected, and I am glad that I picked these up from the library, because I think what I'm going to do is continue this series from the library. At this point, I don't think this is a series that I want to collect, although these covers are really beautiful. They're also quite expensive, and I'm not sure if it's something that I feel like is worth it for me. Just another interesting one, because it is like where vampires are kind of like everyday type of people. They're obviously aren't human. They do drink blood, but they aren't out going crazy. But there's also kind of, I don't want to say plot holes, but there are things that are introduced that still haven't been explained. But like I said, I've only read the first 2 volumes, so there's still time. And I feel like even though I've read 2 volumes and these are pretty like thick, it's still at the very beginning stages, so I don't have a very clear grasp on where this is going to go. But as far as this got 3 stars for me, and then volume 2 got 3.5 stars. Moving on to the next one, which is going to be an interesting one, and that is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I feel like this one has been floating around BookTube lately. Maybe I'm just late to the party with this one. In this story, we're following this character named Catalina Martin. She's actually from Spain, but she's currently living in New York. At the start of the story, she is very desperately seeking someone to go as her like fake boyfriend to go to her sister's wedding back in Spain. And eventually her co-worker Aaron Bradford offers to go with her, but she's just like, well, we don't like each other. I think she actually says that they hate each other. There's no way that she can take him. It just won't work at all. But eventually she realizes she has no other options, so she decides to take him with her. And of course, as you can expect, it goes from a fake relationship to an actual romance. I will say that I didn't dislike it. I feel like as much as some other reviews that I saw, but this was not the best thing ever. This book is close to 500 pages, and honestly it did not need to be that long. Almost half of the book, if not half of the book, was unnecessary because so much of the beginning of this was spent with her at work, which I don't mind having some of that, especially if we're getting introduction into the characters. But with romance, you're expecting most of the book to be spent on exploring the romance, especially when it's going from a dislike type of relationship to characters falling in love with each other. It just spent way too much time on that beginning working aspect of it. Also, the fact that this grown man had to hear from her that you can't show a girl that you like her by basically ignoring her or being rude to her. And it took like up until that point for him to start interacting with her, other than, like I said, him ignoring her or doing things that could be seen as being rude. It was like a lot of weird things about how their relationship was that could have definitely been reevaluated, or he could have like changed his behavior honestly very early on, and it could have changed their dynamic, and they didn't have to like fall in love right away, but they could have at least been cordial to each other. And I don't know, that whole aspect of it was weird. I will say that once they got to Spain and they started pretending, that is when I thought the story was decent. It could have been a lot better than it was, and I'm upset. But yeah, I didn't hate it. It got 3 stars once I put it through CallPal. I was a little worried that it would get less than that, but I think the second half of the book really picked up, and I enjoyed, for the most part, their dynamic and relationship once they were in Spain. I would be willing to give this author another chance. We're gonna leave that here because I've been talking about this too long. The next one that I have to talk about is actually a YA fantasy that I've been meaning to get to for a while. I finally finished it, and that is Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This one is a dual perspective story following Kofi and Econ. I'm probably saying his name wrong. There is also a prologue with other featuring. There is also a prologue featuring other characters, but honestly that kind of ties in later on. But mainly the story is following Kofi and Econ. So Kofi is actually an indentured servant. Her and her mother are under these contracts because of debt that her father racked up. Her mother lets her know like at the beginning of the story that they're very close to paying off their debt. I think they have like 1 or 2 more shows, or maybe like a couple weeks left before they're all paid off. She's really excited about that, trying to think about what is going to happen for them after the fact. But because of that, she ends up messing up, and one of the beasts, or the beast that they're in charge of, almost attacks some wealthy clients, and the guy in charge of them is like, you just lost me a lot of business, you're gonna be racked up even more now. And now it's basically, I think she's like 16 or something like that, or going on 16, and now he's basically saying you're going to be doing this until you're 30. Something ends up happening. She feels like this pressure inside of her, and then she feels this release, and then her mother realizes that she has magic, and like this fire starts, and her mother's like, we need to go. He can't find out that that was you that did that. We need to get out of here. She manages to escape, but her mother doesn't. I'm gonna leave that there because I'm like giving away the whole beginning. Econ is actually going into his final trials to become one of the Son of the Six, which is this elite guard position basically. But during the same event, he ends up having to run off to try to stop escaping indentured servants. Basically where Kofi was, it was a bunch of them, and I think some of them try to run away along with Kofi and her mother. He comes across Kofi and something ends up happening, and he is very startled, and he ends up, it looks like he let her go, and because of that he's kind of like in a very bad position. He's not able to complete his trials. All of his brothers are looking down on him, and he kind of really has no other option. So she comes up with this plan. She's just like, well, I can control this beast that everyone has been hunting down. She's just like, well, since I can control this beast, I can bring it back to become part of the zoo, and that'll rack in a bunch of money so me and my mom can be free. Econ is like, well, if I can go and hunt down this beast and show everyone that I killed it, then I can earn my rightful place as part of the Son of the Six, and I can go back to being in this esteemed position that I was supposed to be in the first place. So in the midst of both of them kind of trying to plan out and get to the point of hunting down this beast, which is called the Shitani, for reasons of their own, they end up running into each other, and they still have their secrets, but they decide that they could work together until they find the beast so that they can, you know, do what each of them are trying to do. I gave you like a good portion of this book, so sorry about that. This was kind of hard to really talk about, and I feel like very different from what I was expecting. This I feel like was kind of overhyped, but I will say that there were a lot of different interesting takes, and I think most fascinated by the forest and all of the different beings. Even like the trees had their own, I don't want to say they had their own personalities, but like defense mechanisms, or like, I don't know. It was interesting, and I'm glad that I read it. I know I'm being super vague, but this is another one I feel like I read earlier in March, so I don't remember all of the details. Like, I remember big things, but those are like spoilers, and I don't want to go into that. So I'm curious to see how this will be handled as far as the sequel. This book ended up getting 3.5 stars from me. We're gonna go ahead and move over into, I think, my final 3.5 star for March, and that was actually Clockwork Angel, which is book 1 in the Fertile Devices series. So in the story, we're following this character named Tessa Gray. She ends up leaving America after her aunt dies and goes to live in Victorian England in London so that she can stay with her brother. But as soon as she like touches down, she ends up being kidnapped by the Dark Sisters, and she finds out about these powers or abilities that she has that she didn't previously know about. She's basically being held hostage there until eventually she is accidentally saved by Will, who is a shadow hunter. He's there because he's been investigating this string of murders, or maybe it was just one murder, I can't exactly remember, but he's investigating a murder, and he kind of stumbles upon her, and he decides to take her back to the Institute of London, and there is where she finds out about shadow hunters and downworlders. This was kind of a little all over the place in the beginning before it kind of came together. These characters are fascinating. They are a bit more interesting than some of the characters in the Mortal Instruments, mainly Tessa and Jim. Will, I don't see the excitement. I don't know if it's just because he's like the typical bad boy. I really didn't understand the attraction to him. This was interesting, and like I said, this one got 3.5 stars. Alright, so moving along, we're going to go into my 4-star section. And with those, we're going to be actually starting off with a book that I really didn't know what to expect from. And that is The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. In this story, we are following the Montoya family. This family is actually used to living with unexplained magic in their mother/grandmother's house, depending on the generation. All of the family members who have not died have left this house for one reason or another. But one day, all the family members get these letters that say, come to the house to collect your inheritances, and that kind of is what sets off the story. It's one of those slow moving stories. It took a minute for me to get into it because I was just like, okay, where is this gonna go? When are things gonna pick up? And when they finally did, I was already invested, and I was just like, I hope everyone's gonna be okay. And I really enjoyed having the characters like revisit family members or visit family members even when they were dead and they never met them. It was fascinating. This is actually really good. If you have not already read this, I would recommend it, and I would also recommend you do it on audio, because this is the type of story that I feel like, because it was slow moving at first, I wouldn't have given this a fair chance. But having it on audio, I know that this is probably a really terrible thing to do, but when I listen to things on audio, when I feel like I'm getting to a point where it's just like either too much going on or not enough going on, I kind of zone out a little bit. But it was one that I was definitely not expecting to enjoy as much as I did. But by the time that I finished this, I just felt very refreshed, and I felt like these people in the story were my family, and I just loved this so much. So glad that I read this one. This one got 4 stars, and I need to get myself a copy. I don't know why I felt the need to repeat that. Moving over into my next 4-star read I have to talk about, which I completely forgot I hadn't talked about this yet. But the next one that I have to talk about is actually Crow Bones by Ann Bishop. This one is kind of like a continuation of those character stories from Lake Silence. We're back at the Jumble, which is run by Vicky Devine. Possible spoilers for Lake Silence, but I'm not going to say any more than that. And it's actually Trickster Night, which is basically Halloween, and she is hosting quite a few people there. But things quickly turn sinister after someone shows up to the Jumble dressed up as Crow Bones, who's basically like the Crow Guard's boogeyman. Then after that, humans and others are turning up murdered, and it's like the police of the town, as well as a few others here and there, are trying to figure out who's behind these murders and stop them before like the elders, which is like the big others that everyone is scared of, including the smaller others. They're trying to figure out what's going on before those others decide it's time for them to get involved with the whole situation. So I will say that this one did start off a bit shaky. I think mostly because we kind of are very quickly introduced into this like boogeyman without really any foreknowledge at all, and we kind of just have to go along with the story. Although it's very quickly explained what's going on, I feel like it was kind of hard to follow at times. So this is one of those stories that's kind of, it's like told from like an omnipresent viewpoint. Maybe not necessarily an omnipresent narrator, but we do get to see different perspectives, and there was a lot of like unknown characters. Like we see these characters like experimenting, and there's more going on with them, and they're clearly behind the whole situation, but it's like kind of up in the air until you get to that point. And I feel like this was the first book that was done, so I was kind of a little lost at first before I realized, okay, this is exactly what's going on. Now we just need to figure out who it is, and obviously the author's trying to kind of drag you along until you get to the point where it's revealed who exactly these people were. And once he got to that point, well, before it got to that point, I was starting to get very invested, but there were still like so many unanswered questions that I have for this. This one was interesting. Obviously I enjoyed it. It ended up getting 4 stars by the end. While I did appreciate the story, I do hope that we in the future get more stories with our people from Lakeside. I know I keep saying that, and I'm wishing on it. I'm just, hopefully it happens. Also, I would like another story set in Bennett, because things were also kind of left open-ended there. So moving back over into a couple mangas, the next one that I have is Practice Makes Perfect, Volume 1 by Yu Hanamiya. This one is following 2 athletes, Nahara Suzuki, and she plays volleyball, and Takaya Yano, who's in judo. But both of them are very inexperienced when it comes to love, relationships, things like that. And they both recently got dumped because they are very inexperienced. The girl ends up overhearing the guy telling his friend about that. Knowing that she's in a similar situation, she actually approaches him and is like, hey, same. Because they're athletes, they've been really into their athletics since they've been kids, and they know only way to get better is to practice. They're like, hey, we can practice together, get better so we can, you know, be ready for the next relationship and not have this issue again. They weren't really expecting too much from this other than to get the experience, but of course, as you could probably expect, when you have a romance manga, the two of them are going to start falling in love with each other. And this was actually unexpectedly very cute. I don't know why I was not expecting this to be as cute as it was. I think maybe because of the premise made it seem like it was going to be more sexual, which it did have those moments, but I felt like this was more on the cutesy end because it is going to be about the relationship in the end, not just the physical thing. I don't know. I just thought it was super cute and I fell in love with these characters. I will say that if you decide to pick this up, it is a bit repetitive because at the beginning of each chapter, it's one of those that kind of repeats the situation that they're in. It is one that kind of tries to change up how it's said, but literally each chapter just like, this is what's going on, this is what they decided, and here's where they are now before getting into the chapter. So that kind of takes up little storytelling pages, but it's not too bad. I kind of just like quickly skimmed through those pages after the first chapter and got into whatever was going to be the content of that one. This one got 4 stars and I am looking forward to reading the rest of the series. The next one that I have to talk about is My Boy Volume 1 by Hitomi Takano. This one is following this character named Satako Tawada. She is a 30-year-old office worker for a sporting goods company, and she's pretty much just kind of going through the motions of life. One day she's coming home from work and she sees this little boy outside. It's like really late at night and he's practicing soccer. She ends up talking to him for a little bit, realizes that he is trying out for his school's team. She decides to give him a few pointers because she actually used to play. That kind of starts this very strange companionship between the two of them because they very quickly realize that both of them are lonely. And I'm guessing that the series is just going to follow their relationship and how it goes from there. It's not like a romantic relationship or anything. It's just like these two met, they unexpectedly connected because they are in similar-ish situations. So I was a bit concerned when I picked this up that this was going to be like a huge, very uncomfortable like age gap romance, and I was just like, I don't know about that. But I think when I picked it up, or before I picked it up, I did look at a few reviews and they were like, no, it's not actually that. So that's why I did pick up Volume 1. I am kind of shocked that I am already caring about these characters so much after just one volume. They're both in basically pretty shitty situations, and although I feel like this isn't something that would typically happen, the two of them just seem to work together. This was interesting. It was a good story, and I am curious about how this will continue. And this one will, or did, get 4 stars. The second to last thing that I have to talk about is a series. I was really only going to be reading the final book in the series. As I was listening to the recap in book 3, I was just like, I vaguely remembered what was going on. And at first I was like, maybe I'll just reread the last book. But then at that point I was like, if I'm going to read book 2, I might as well read book 1 or reread book 1 and just do a full like binge of the entire series. So that's literally what I did, and that was the books from The Aurora Cycle by Amy Kaufman J. Kristoff. So we're following this character at the start of the story named Tyler Jones. It is the night before he is set to graduate Aurora Academy. He's expecting to be the first place alpha, and in getting that he would have first picked of the draft basically of all the Aurora Academy students because they're split up into different disciplines. But the night before, he's unable to sleep and he decides that he's going to go and let out some of his like nervous jitters by going out on a quick flight. But while he's out, he gets like a distress signal from this lost ship, and once he gets there he realizes that pretty much everyone is dead except for one girl who is somehow still alive in her stasis pod. So he goes and saves her, and that is kind of like the true start of the story. And the girl that he saved turns out to be Aurora G. Lynn O'Malley. Aurora actually set out, I think, almost 200 years prior to the start of the story to go to Octavia 3. She's told to stow away on the ship of Aurora Squad 312, which is the group of characters we're following for pretty much the whole book. And it is them figuring out what exactly is going on, what they've been caught up in, and trying to get to the bottom of things. I'm not really going to go over Aurora Rising and then Aurora Burning because both of those are rereads, and honestly I kind of just read them to refresh myself. But talking a little bit about Aurora's End. At the end of Aurora Burning, something happens and our characters are kind of like split up over like multiple parts of the universe, maybe even a little bit more like universe and time. Slight spoilers on that, but this one kind of explores a lot. These, I will say, they all got decent ratings, but I did have a few issues with some things that happened. Starting off, I don't really understand why Finian was on the cover of this book, honestly. Like, I don't get it. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy Finian's character, but if anything, I don't understand why it couldn't just be smaller and having all of them on the cover. I feel like that would have made the most sense, but Finian, okay. He didn't play like any huge significant role. Like, I felt like pretty much everyone was equal except for one character, which I will get into. I'm trying to think of how to talk about this because I don't want to, like, I realize that when I talk about books, I usually talk about the negative points in these reviews. I don't know why I tend to do that, but I realize that I usually, like, yeah, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, but it was still a good book. And it's like, well, you just spent 10 minutes talking about why you didn't like it, and then one line about, yeah, it was still good though. I think my biggest complaint about this, which might not be something that everyone is gonna have an issue with, but it's something that I feel like I'm picking up on more and more, is that the fact that the only main character, like the only main brown skinned person of color character that we have in this whole series has to sacrifice herself. Now, I will admit she didn't die, which is great. That's a great improvement. But when you think about how this is all set up, she sacrificed being where she is from so that the rest of them are able to complete their missions. Once I got to that point and realized that that was the direction that the rest of the story was going to take, I was very upset because I was just like, literally, she barely has any lines the whole book. And it was just like, almost seemed like she wasn't important until they needed her type of thing. She literally has to sacrifice everything, and finally feeling like she fits in to be like, oh well, this is the only way that you guys can go and finish off what needs to be done. And they go back and they don't do anything. They just go back because one of them has like family there, and then he wants her. So it's just like, that was really the only purpose for either of them two to go back and not Zila. And I was, if you can't tell, I was very frustrated. I think they tried to make it better by like honoring her. She was like one of the figureheads of the school. This makes me reevaluate if I want to continue to read these authors, because why? I hate to say other than that, because I feel like that's still like a huge issue, because although they aren't sacrificing their life, like they're alive or dead in that way, they're still sacrificing themselves for our white characters to be at the forefront. And I'm like, no. Like, I was so close to the end and I was just like, do I just stop? Because as soon as I realized, as soon as, like, it hadn't even been said on the page, but I was like, they better not. They better not. And I was like, they're gonna do it, aren't they? And they did it, and I was just like, anyway, I'm gonna put this down because that's making me mad the more I think about it. But as far as like the actual sci-fi elements of the story, I very much enjoyed, and I feel like if I could get this in maybe a more adult setting that does not sacrifice our POC characters, that would be absolutely amazing. Anyway, Aurora Rising this time around got 4.5 stars. Aurora Burning this time got 4 stars. And then obviously for my first time reading, Aurora's End got 4 stars. Sorry. The final book that I have to talk about in my only 5-star for this month was Black Girl Call Home by Jasmine Mans, and this is a collection of poetry. Tia, I finally read it. I've been meaning to read this one for like a couple months now. This is another one that I need to get me a physical copy of, because I feel like this is one of those reads where I need to read it multiple times. I need my own copy so I can like write or mark or do whatever I want. I struggled though with rating this. I didn't actually put this through Compile or anything, because I was like, I don't know how you would compile poetry, especially since it's like following a wide variety of topics. I know I didn't really talk about the last one just now. Collection of poetry, 5 stars. I thought it was really good. I'm definitely going to need to reread that at some point, probably multiple times. But that's everything that I read, or finished I should say, in March. I don't think I really have anything else to talk about. It was a pretty good reading month. It's actually a really good reading month. I got through more than I thought I would, especially considering like half of the month I feel like I was kind of out of commission. Let me know down in the comments what are some of the things that you finished in March, if you had any favorites or anything that you wanted to comment, and just anything you want. Comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.